Welcome back to the Legacymakers podcast. This is the Showing Up mini-series. We're talking about showing up in the family, home with your spouse, so on and so forth. We just finished showing up in the sex talk with your spouse. It was really good. Part one of this mini-series series.
Spicy.
Now we're talking about showing up with the sex talk with your kids.
Yes.
This is a big one.
It is big.
It's a big one.
Huge.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I'll start. I'll start because it's important to make sure that we are creating a culture of just openness and conversation in our homes around this topic because of the incessant, nonstop, the things that the world is communicating out to,
availability.
The availability of, all this information that the media is talking about sex and body image and all that stuff. We've got to be the first ones to say anything about, body image and sex to our kids. We've got to initiate that. We got to do it quick. And there's ways that you can do that at an early age too. You don't have to wait until they're like 11 or 12 when they're going through puberty. You can start
too late.
Start young. Yeah, exactly. You can start young. And there's things that we can start initiating. And it's all about creating this open conversation, this open dialogue, and helping them feel comfortable with their own bodies and their own sex organs. And understanding that
becoming the trusted voice in their life in that area. That if they have questions, whatever they need to know, that you're the one they go to because you're the one that introduced it.
Yes. And that is what you want.
Yeah. There's actually something called the principle of first mentions. Have you guys heard of it? Yeah. It's so cool. It's this idea that whoever is whatever is mentioned first about a topic is the belief and the understanding of that topic that person holds on to. I don't know if I said that right.
That's good.
So if you are the first to communicate what sex is to your kids at, say, age 5, 6, whatever's appropriate for them, that will be their standard of an understanding of what sex is. If their teacher
It's powerful.
At school is the first to share, or their friends, or a brother of their friend is the first to share what sex is. That will be their baseline understanding of what sex is, and then you as a parent have to come in and try to undo that understanding and rebuild, and that is hard to do. It's doable because the grace of God goes with us and before us, but there's this idea of the importance of, gosh, we've got to be the first to mention all these beautiful things about the body, about sex, about what God created and how he wired us and made us. We've got to be the first to communicate that to our kids in order to establish a foundation and an understanding that helps them in life rather hurts them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the sooner you start, the better. You know, I hear stories of people, you know, talking to their kids about sex when their kids are, you know, 13, 14. And it's like, first of all, it's probably too late. Like they probably already heard about it. Second of all, usually it's the dad, and it's sometimes what I hear is an awkward conversation, and the kid doesn't really want to listen or talk about it. And so the sooner you start, then the more normal it becomes, and the more used to hearing it becomes, and they become more comfortable with the idea, and they come around to understanding it more. And then, like you said, Natalie, you know, the principle of first, what is it? First mentions. You become the source of information for them, and you get to be the one to instruct them and to guide them into the truth about, you know, what God glorifying sex is all about. You know, from our bodies to, you know, in the covenant of marriage.
So I think it starts, like Ben said, like as early as possible, right? We're not talking to like 2-year-olds about actually what sex is, but we're talking to them about their body and how God made them, and God called them beautiful, and even using the right words for their penis and their vagina, and how those parts of your body are sacred, so we protect them and we treasure them, you know, using these words that remove shame from them and see their body as made as beautifully. And I think so much of it is in the words that we choose. But there's also, I mean, so many resources out there that that are helpful. Like even I think of that topic specifically. There's one called God Made Me. that talks about that. There's, I mean, I could list a bunch of resources.
Right, extra resources.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the resource that we have used so far is called Before I Was Born. And there's these different books for different ages. Cool. And it kind of just at the age when they reach that age, and it's an age range, right? So there's one that is like 5 to 8. So it's like whenever you feel like they're ready for that topic of the sex talk, then you just read the book with them. It's so non-threatening. There's pretty pictures, and it's really biblical and upfront about what's happening, and then it just opens that conversation in like a progressive way.
Yeah, it's good to use. I mean, I think it's good to use books like that because they're used to reading books, and it's just a book, and they like to pick it up, and they like to read it, and they like you can talk about it with them, and just have just go through the story, and and there's another one that we use called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
Yeah.
They have Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, and then they have Good Pictures, Bad Pictures like for teenagers or whatever it is. And those are great too. And it just goes through like, what to do if you see quote unquote a bad picture. You run and you talk to your parents and you tell your parents about it. And, your parents talk you through it and like, oh, how did it make you feel? Or what did you think about that? And, you help normalize it in that way too.
Yeah, the average age of exposure to pornography is 8 years old. So having those conversations early on in like such a simple way, that book is so good because it even says bad pictures, it defines them broadly. Like good pictures make us feel happy and good, and bad pictures make us feel scared or confused. And there's all kinds of bad pictures, not just pornography. There's like things
violence,
violent. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so having that distinction and that creating that conviction in their heart that they would listen to. But when they see something that makes them uncomfortable or scared or anything, then they respond to it instead of just ignoring it.
Yeah, and I think the important thing too is, like Megan said, using specific words and making sure the language that you're choosing is on point. But also your expressions, like your facial expressions.
Oh yeah.
You want to make sure that like you don't appear to be shocked, like
you're touching yourself.
What?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You did what?
Yeah.
So you want to try and avoid that, I think, because it triggers that there is some sort of emotional response in them when they see that you're having an emotional response. And so you want to make sure that you're responding in a way that appears to be not affected. Like, oh, okay. Can you tell me about that? Just keep try and keep a straight face and try and just listen and understand and ask questions and understand that like, they live in the world and things are going to happen that you probably wish don't happen. And so being prepared for that, emotionally yourself, and then kind of having like, a practice kind of understanding of how you're going to respond when that happens, because it will. I think that's huge. And then the other thing too is like, what do we do when like, our kids are exploring their bodies and they're using their hands to touch their penises and touch their vaginas and touch their butts and boobies and Rory says boo-boos, which is funny. But, especially my boys are constantly, they're playing around with their penises.
Exploring. Yep.
And so how do you handle that as a dad and as a parent? And you have to teach them that like that's a sacred part of our body.
Right.
And we want to use that part of our body for
a purpose.
Specific purposes, to go pee and for other things that maybe we'll talk about later.
Maybe.
Right.
When they're a little bit older.
Yeah.
I do think like something that's in this realm, we can easily like squirm away from these conversations, but I really think that these conversations can be so natural in the family life. Like if we change our heart attitude towards them, and see sex as a gift, see sex the way God designed it. Maybe even you need to do like a biblical study on what does God say about sex, so that your heart can be more open to the conversations. Because within family life, these conversations do come up naturally.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
We want them to happen. Yes, totally. We want them to happen. If they don't, if they can't talk to us about it at home, there's going to be conversations happening with friends and whatnot. I mean, I have so many thoughts about this, but I I was just thinking of, for example, when a girlfriend of mine was telling me about her kids started asking about sex because they were watching some kind of a nature video and they were seeing the animals, right? So and it's like, oh my gosh, what a brilliant tool to like lean into that conversation of, oh yeah, that's what happens. Or like the birds have the dance and, daddy has a dance or, whatever. But it's like, like this fun way of normalizing again and celebrating. And the words we use to communicate to our kids about sex will be the lens of which they, approach this topic. And it will have the, either it will come with shame or it won't based on how we carry it. And so if there's any shame in us as parents that we're experiencing or fears, like we've got to check that with the Lord because it will diffuse into them. I was talking to some girlfriends about, just our boys exploring their bodies at a young age and how, your first response, we see that and all of a sudden we worry about, oh my gosh, are they going to masturbate forever? And oh my gosh, are they going to have social issues and intimacy issues because they're masturbating already? And it's like, oh my goodness, slow down. It's okay. This isn't that big of a deal. It's not that, it's not there yet, but we're bringing our fears into, when we walk into the bathroom and we see them touching themselves, we're bringing all that experience and fear out of a heart to protect, of course, but it's just wrong. It's not for them or, so we need to settle that with the Lord. We need to work through that. And this idea of, a sex talk, I almost want to push back against the word talk because, we grew up with it being that one talk that mom brings you out to, takes you out and gives you a purity ring and talks the talk and tells you not to do anything. And then, on with your way and you never talk about it again. But the sex talk, showing up for it means like showing up all the time to have these talks with our kids and normalizing it for sure. I think that's...
Birds and Bees. Have you seen...
I've heard of them, yes.
Yeah, they talk about the drip drip. Like it's
there
this constant... These little conversations, little questions they ask, just constantly giving them little pieces of what God's perspective is on their body, on everything.
And I've heard too, if your kids are, my sister would tell this to me as I would ask her questions about raising kids. She would say, if your kid is mature enough to ask a certain question, give them the actual answer. Or else they're going to learn how to go find it somewhere else. So answer their questions with legit truth so they can learn to trust you. Oh, when I ask mom these questions, she tells me, doesn't tell me, well, later on I'll share, but she tells me it in the moment.
It away in some childish way.
It's like, no, give them legit answers. And I was just thinking of also, this is kind of all over the place, but I was thinking of, Grant at 4.5 right now, he's been loving looking at his body. Like he'll go in front of the mirror and he is just like, he'll take his clothes off and be like, I'm so handsome. And he'll be just looking all over, and he'll be like, Mama. And I just walk in and I'm like, man, God made a beautiful body. Look at that body. Look at your penis. Look at your arms. Look at how strong you are. Like God made you beautifully. And those arms will do this and those legs will carry you here. And just like making it about all of his body and the way that God made it beautifully to let him know I'm not afraid of his body either. I'm not afraid of what he's doing. He has nothing to hide from. He can keep looking at himself while I walk in the room. Now if Jade were to come in and touch him, I would address that's for Grant. You go play with your horse or whatever, But that's, we're not there yet at 4 yet to be having certain conversations. But as far as it goes for us now, it's calling his penis what it is. It's making sure he uses it to, for the right reasons and not to just, touch all the time and recorrecting and adjusting when he does. And
it feels more like just focusing on like what Ben said, the facial reactions and just the initial reactions when Grant goes running by and he's naked and I can remember early on it was like, oh son, put some clothes on. You're like, honey, don't just let him be. It's just like, so now it's just like, oh, there he goes. All right, right on, man, get it. Do your thing, bro. But just keeping it really light and just really fun and not.
I think that's true even of our responses to their questions too, right?
It is true.
Have to feel so weighty.
No,
you can just answer their questions. So
we don't need to go inside or shrivel up and get so nervous. Oh gosh,
and I think too, especially when the kids are young and they're asking out of curiosity, right? Not with older kids who have maybe heard something from someone else and they're checking in with you about what that means. But I think when they're young, it's like the things don't shock them, right? When you just tell them, it might feel like, oh my gosh, I just said the penis goes in the vagina or something like that.
Yeah.
But like to them, they're like, oh.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
It's
what are we
so
having for dinner?
true. It's so
So
true. That
low
is an
stakes
excellent
for them.
point.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it. On the point of masturbation, though, I thought about this, and it's something that, my boys, they play around with their penises and whatnot, and I'll tell them, like, because I'm a dude, I did that, I masturbated, and I know that it's gonna be a possibility for them.
Yeah.
And so, but what I do is, though, I say things like once, and I just move on to the next thing. And I don't know if this is right, but if they're messing around, and I'm like, all right, Smith, we don't do that, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
And I think like just saying it once with like some sort of like authority, and just kind of say, hey, we don't do that. That's an inappropriate way to touch ourselves, and and just be done.
We've also recently, from a suggestion of a friend, come up with a code word.
Oh yeah.
So we're not embarrassing them, right?
Yes.
When they're out in public, like
shout out. To
yes.
Yeah.
Papaya.
Yeah.
Pants.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a thing. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
any other thoughts on showing up for the sex
I'll
talk?
just say we do, again, some resources if you want them.
Yeah.
We have a blog post that on our website.
I'll put it in the link.
Yeah, that
Cool.
is
On the,
titled
show.
In Healthy Sexuality with Our
Cool.
Children, something like that.
Awesome.
But there's a whole list of resources of different books you can read with the kids,
Yeah.
books to read on your own, websites that are helpful with tons of resources.
Cool.
Also resources for talking about pornography, like both topics. So check that out if you're like, what do I even do? How do I equip myself?
Yeah.
That's a huge resource.
Yeah, it's good.
Wow. I would just say, like, if this topic in particular, or any of that we've talked about in this mini series, like, is something that you really want to hear more about, that would be exciting to hear too from people who are listening.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'd love to like really dive into this some more.
Yeah.
specific
Maybe something that
question.
we could look into a little bit later.
Yeah. Would love to hear
in the way
it.
of material or content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah, we'll put the link to the blog on our show notes, and then if you have any questions, anything you want to know about, learn about, hear about, put it in the comments, send us an email, and we can maybe think about how we can put that in an episode one of these days. So
Great.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our Showing Up series. We are so thankful, and we're so excited. We got a lot more in store for the Legacymakers podcast. So stay tuned, subscribe, watch, listen, share it, and we're thankful that you're here. Thanks.